Wanderer is one of my favorite characters, and today I will share with you some very interesting tips. We will check his best combo, some hidden tech, a few details on his Ascension Passives and more. But later in the video, there will be a section that will serve as an update to new Wanderer mains on the many options that he got since release thanks to Fontaine. We have new teams, artifact options, weapons and even stat priorities. As always for this series, this is not a comprehensive guide. These videos are very specific and aimed at people that already know the basics of the character. Firstly, there is a lot of misinformation about what to do exactly when attacking on Wanderer. Let's talk about it. To start, it's important to know that his Ascension 4 allows him to dodge without consuming his special stamina, while also getting some damage in. This passive has a ramping up chance to trigger with each normal or charge attack hit. The more it doesn't trigger, the more chances it gets to do so. When it does, a flash will appear and an audio cue will play. Knowing this, we can look at 3 general combos: charge attack spam, normal attack spam, and a mix between the two. Contrary to popular belief, charge attack spam is very situational. For this to be your best combo, you need to not have a signature weapon, not have normal attack speed buffs, and be in a situation where not dodging is fine as it's harder to do between charged attacks. Plus, you will get much less chances to trigger his Ascension 4, and if you dash without it, say goodbye to a chunk of attacks as it will cost a good amount of stamina. Furthermore, his charge attacks have a unique animation that doesn't actually lock Wanderer for a big amount of time, meaning that if you play him well, you can cancel a charge attack with the next one and sneak in more than usual. This can be mechanically hard to perform. Most people will do around 12 or 13 charge attacks as C0, but when played perfectly, 14 is also possible. On the positive side of charge attacks, however, it has to be noted that they have bigger AoE than normals and some weapons buff them. If played really well and without too many of the restrictions I just talked about, then it can be your best combo. And if you do decide to spam charge attacks, change your voiceover to Chinese. Believe me on this, it's worth it. A good middle ground between spamming charge attacks and normal attacks is N2C. Generally, this can be his best combo while also being easy to do. I would advise most Wanderer players that are not too sweaty to attack like this. It does not offer the best trigger rate of characters like Xingqiu and Yelan, but aside from that, it can also include Ascension 4 dashes if needed, and it's just good overall damage. But spamming normal attacks is, in my opinion, the peak Wanderer gameplay. This can be done in 2 ways. Just spamming normals and using his Ascension 4 dash only when necessary, but that's generally worse than doing N2C, or using his Ascension 4 dash to actually increase your damage. This is harder to perform and should only be used every 2 attack strings, either after an N2 or N3. So basically N3, N2 dash, or N3 twice dash. The first being the technically better one unless skill or ping issues. The reason why we're dashing there is because after 6 total hits, we're basically guaranteed to have his Ascension 4 ready. This playstyle also allows a few things to really shine. Characters that trigger via normals have the easiest time ever triggering as many of their talents as possible. So Yelan, Yunjin are great with this. And Wanderer's signature weapon gets to be stacked as fast as possible, offering more damage overall. This combo also gets better with attack speed buffs. But if none of these things are present for you, then you can go back to N2C or charge attack spam or even a mix. Of course, keep in mind that this mostly apply to a damage approach and not a reaction based Wanderer, which is not the focus of this video. And a side note for all the oil princes out there that have C6 Wanderer is that you should spam normals regardless. And if you feel very good at the game, actually dodge every full attack string, because the extra normals from C6 will guarantee Ascension 4 every full attack string. What you do exactly changes depending on so many factors. I will leave a resource that I found in the Wanderer's main Discord in the description. It has calcs for basically every single combo in tons of different scenarios. Credits are in the link. I didn't make it, I'm just sharing it with you. Now that you know how to attack during his skill up time, let's not forget that his general best in slot set requires a charge attack to activate. And there is a small trick here. This charge attack can be used right after the skill, but also just before it. This is a minor adjustment that will depend on the duration of your buffs, but the same can be done to a normal attack. Although it won't increase its damage, it can achieve a couple of other things. Using a skill right before the hit is actually delivered will give you an energy particle a bit earlier, and it's one more chance at triggering this Ascension 4 passive. It also gets cancelled very fast, so it's just one more chance to trigger a Yelan, Facial C6 and such talents. Let's go a bit deeper on this though, because an important part of his kit is his Ascension 1. This is a buff based on the elements that are close to him when his skill is used. Up to 2 elements will be chosen following this order. Generally, Cryo is the best one, followed by Pyro for overall damage. Hydro and Electro are harder to evaluate as they don't directly affect your damage, but they can result in higher uptime or more burst casts. A character that is often played with Wanderer is Bennett, a great buffer for attack scaling units. Everyone knows this. However, sometimes, when lots of other elements are in place, his burst might not actually apply Pyro to the enemy, but since it applies Pyro to yourself, Wanderer will basically guarantee to have the 30% attack buff. But this only happens if you don't press his skill right away. The ticking rate of Bennett's self-application is once per second, so very often if you switch and press his skill right away, you won't get it. Using the charge attack into skill combo we talked about earlier will make sure that he gets this buff all the time. Same for the normal into skill, but only if not performed too fast. And on a side note, not related to Wanderer, a common mistake done with Bennett is that the pyro application ticks at the same rate as the buff being actually given to you. So if you have something that snapshots, which in short is a talent that uses your stats for its entire duration, let's say Beidou's Burst, you switch to her and wait a tiny bit before actually casting it. Not waiting might result in snapshotting Beidou's attack without Bennett's buff. This does not apply to Wanderer because his attacks use his stats dynamically, so if he gets buffed during the skill, his damage changes accordingly. You can also get very creative with how you infuse elements in a skill, sometimes even solo without the help of enemy auras or against enemies that have an aura that you can't remove. For example, Diona's shield will briefly apply cryo to you and it can be coordinated with his skill to get that 20% extra crit rate. But these are very niche uses. Generally, you will play around Bennett's self-application or try to apply the elements to the enemies. Not really a tech per se, but it's important to know and remember that if you get interrupted while in Wanderer's skill, you can recover right away at 0 stamina cost, even if you don't have his Ascension 4 activated, by simply dashing. You're also immune to fall damage when staggered in his skill, but that's hardly ever useful. One more gameplay tip. Try to not hug the enemy. There's something a bit unique about his third normal attack. It's divided into 2 different hits, and that happens often on many characters. But this attack, when too close to the enemy, will actually deliver both hits in the same exact frame. Which is a very minor problem, but it could bother a lot combos like N3N2 dash. His Ascension 4 can only be triggered once every 0.1 seconds, meaning that this attack, if performed too close, will count as 1, when it would otherwise count as 2 different hits. So not only do we lose the extra chance to trigger it, we also don't get the overall chance to go up as it should. Moving on, Fontaine did a lot for Wanderer. Since its first release back in 3.3, we have seen a great deal of characters and weapons that can work well with him. First and foremost, Furina, an incredible buffer and off-fielder, but with some caveats. She will make Wanderer squishier, which can be a problem, but as we all know, she also wants you to include a healer. Thanks to her, Marichosi becomes Wanderer's best in slot set, even better than his signature set. The only problem with it can be overcritting, since Wanderer has a crit rate Ascension stat, which basically makes his Ascension 1 passive hard to build around if you plan to trigger the cryo version. Furina also allows 2 very decent weapons to be used on Wanderer. Tome of Eternal Flow, when not needing any normal attacks from teammates, allows a charge attack spam playstyle to be his best. It can also serve as a decent stat stick regardless. Cash Flow Supervision is basically the same as Tula, so it's potentially one of his best options, but the problem is, Furina allows Marichosi to be played and Cash Flow, even if on the lower side, also gives you crit rate. This combination can still make sense without a Cryo Ascension 1, but requires the right build. Before Furina, it was also very rare for an attack goblet to be ever better than an Anemo one on Wanderer. And since Furina allows for some very interesting teams that don't actually use Bennett and his massive attack buff, Then with Faruzan added in the mix, we could even say that attack and Anemo are about equal for the goblet slot. But this is honestly the main change in stats, and it really comes down to your exact build. But do not underestimate attack main and substats in situations like this. Fontaine also came with a new craftable catalyst, which is so competitive and one of his best free-to-play options. This will require him to use a skill and receive healing for somewhere around 3.6k, depending on how much HP you have exactly. Once that happens and the bond of life it gives you is cleared, he will get up to 40% elemental damage. Of course, rarely an attack substat weapon can rival crit alternatives, but for a craftable option, this is great. Going back to Furina, she will also allow new teammates to be played fairly well with Wanderer. A very underrated unit is Mika. He's a specialized physical damage support, but he's also a great healer and an attack speed buffer. Let's talk about attack speed. In Genshin, most melee attacks have heal lag, which is basically a slowdown of your attacks that make them feel heavier, but it affects attack speed buffs negatively. However, ranged attacks like Wanderer do not produce any heal lag, meaning that an attack speed buff given to him works quote-unquote as intended. A Diluc with 50% attack speed will not actually attack 50% faster, but Wanderer will. Here's a side-by-side of 0% attack speed buffs spamming normals, and a Wanderer with 20% speed buffs. On the left we can get 5 N3s plus N2 once, while on the right we manage 7 N3s. Here's the damage difference between the two. The attack speed buff is effectively giving us a 20-25% damage increase. And since Wanderer is generally played as the main, often only damage dealer, an increase in damage is pretty huge. Let's say we were to only spam charge attacks instead. Generally, when you see something giving you attack speed, it means normal attack speed. But his C1 actually buffs charge attack speed as well. The difference between a perfect execution of 0% attack speed buffs and the 10% from his C1 results in 1 extra charge attack being used, 14 as C0, 15 as C1. These differences are going to change depending on what animation manages to sneak out thanks to the extra attack speed. But overall, and up to 160%, which is the attack speed cap, it's a very good buff to Wanderer. It also translates to better trigger rate of certain teammates' passives, an easier time getting to his stamina free dodge, faster stacking of his weapon, etc. Now, I have quite a few extra tips that did not fit in this video because they're mostly for exploration, so if you're down for a part 2 or more like a different video on them, let me know. Any support via like or sub is greatly appreciated and I hope this was useful to my fellow Wanderer mates. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.